So my wife of almost 3 decades passed away recently from a cardiac arrest, and I am still grieving, so forgive me if the updates on the situation don't come soon enough or in case I make some mistakes while narrating the incident. I am 52 years old and so is my wife, and we have a 28-year-old son together, but we have not been in touch with him for the past 6 years because of a huge fight that we had a while ago. My wife and I met when we were in high school, and it was pretty much love at first sight for me, and as soon as both of us had graduated from college, we decided to get married and start a family. She decided that she was going to be a stay-at-home wife and I could focus on working and expanding the business that my father had started. He had an advertising agency, and the plan had always been that once I graduated from college I would take over and learn the ropes before he retired. Both my wife and I were business majors, so I did consult her before making any decisions, and even when we were in college, we had always known that this was the plan, and she didn't really mind being at home and taking care of the household either, because we knew that we were equals and both our jobs were important in their own right, and we liked to believe that we would be able to raise our son the same way. But obviously, something had gone wrong in our parenting because we were not able to instill the same values in our son that we had hoped to. It all started going wrong initially when he was in high school, and we would constantly be getting reports of our son turning into a total bully, and apparently, he had been hanging out with the kind of kids who thought that it was cool to skip class and go out and smoke during school hours. Our son had never been an exceptionally brilliant student, but at least he had been disciplined and honest up until middle school, but after that, I don't even know what went wrong. All I know is that one day he had suddenly gone from being an obedient and sincere child to a rule-breaking bully. My wife and I tried to discipline him several times, but it just never worked, and we even threatened to kick him out, but we knew that we would never be able to do that, and the problem was that he seemed to know it as well, which is why he never took it seriously. We kept pushing him to do better and just be a better person in general, but he did not care about it and continued to behave the way he thought was appropriate. It was quite disheartening for us as parents, and we began to feel pretty helpless. And then after high school ended, he told us that he would not be attending college because he thought it was a waste of time and he wanted to start working straight away. He said that he hadn't even been applying and had actually been lying to us in the few months leading up to his graduation from high school, and I really lost my head at that point because there was just no way that I was ready to accept that my son would not be going to college. My wife and I were very upset, and we yelled at him a lot during that period of time, but it made no difference to him, and honestly, it was pretty pointless because the damage was already done and his grades were so low anyway, that I highly doubt any decent college would have accepted him. So I decided to tell him that he could work and take a gap year if that's what he wanted, but he could no longer live with us without paying rent. He tried to fight me on that, but legally, I could totally kick him out if I wanted to because he was 18 and I did not owe it to him to let him live with me without paying rent. Under usual circumstances, I probably would not have acted that way, but the way that my son had been behaving the past years before that, it was very hard for me to ignore everything and just let him have his way all the time. After a lot of fighting, it was decided that he would look for a job, and once he was able to find one, he would start paying rent. I even planned on charging him for groceries and other bills, but my wife talked me out of it and said that that would be a little too much. Within a few weeks, he had started looking for jobs and was applying to every position that was available, which made him seem quite serious about his future, and I thought that things were finally changing for him because he was actually stepping up and taking responsibility for himself. I was feeling a bit relieved, but I guess I was too quick to judge the situation because he started getting rejected by every place that he was applying to, and I guess it made sense because he was only applying to high-paying positions instead of starter positions, and obviously nobody would want to hire somebody like him, who had no experience and no degree either. I tried to tell him that he could start off by applying to slightly lower positions like cashier and stuff, but he said that it was beneath his dignity and he was not going to do stupid menial things like that, which was ridiculous because that's the only kind of job anybody would trust him with until he had paid his dues. I tried to explain to him that he had no experience, he did not have a college degree, and even his high school grades were pretty bad, so he could not just expect everything to be a cakewalk for him at this point in his life, and he would have to pay his dues first. But he was adamant and said that until he was able to find a job that he liked, he was not going to work for anything less than what he thought he deserved. I thought this was just a clever tactic for him to avoid working and he could just live with us for free because the conditions that I had set forth said that he would have to pay rent after he got a job, and if he didn't get one, then he would never have to pay up. I knew what he was trying to do, so I decided to speak to a friend of mine and asked him to hire my son because there was no way that I was going to let him sit at home and do nothing when he was not even going to college. After a lot of discussions, I managed to convince my friend to give my son a paid internship at his startup, and my son had no choice but to accept it because it paid a decent amount for a starting position and it was not menial like he said. He worked under my friend for a couple of months and he did a decent job, so he got a permanent position as the assistant to one of the higher ups in the company, and I was quite happy about this arrangement because this way, I could keep tabs on what he was up to and he would also be able to have some sort of direction in his life instead of just wandering around aimlessly like most of the guys from his friend's circle in high school. For a few years, everything was going well, and my friend told me that even though he was not the most sincere or hard-working employee, he was doing a decent job and it was fine. They were a startup, so they could not afford to hire anybody better at the time either. Over time their company grew and so did my son's responsibilities and workload, along with his salary. I thought it was a good thing for him because now he would have to spend more time at work and really get serious about everything, and he would also get paid more, so that was pretty good. But just a year after his first raise, he came home one day and informed my wife and me that he was quitting his job because it was just way too much work for him and he couldn't do this anymore. I had no idea what he was talking about because as far as I was concerned, this was a great deal for him, but he was just letting it go. Obviously, I was very upset about it because it was like he had no gratitude for the opportunities that he was getting, knowing full well how difficult it had been for me to create the opportunities for him because, with his qualifications and experience, it would have been incredibly difficult for him to find the kind of job that he wanted to do, on his own. And now that he was finally getting paid more and could even afford to get an apartment of his own, he was thinking of quitting. This had always been my biggest issue with him because he would always just quit anytime anything got a little difficult. And that's no way to live because if he continued at this rate, then he would never be able to accomplish anything because everything is difficult, and if he really wanted to make something of himself then he would have to learn to stick it out and understand that better opportunities were not going to just fall into his lap. He would have to work for it and make himself worthy of the things that he wanted. He had to learn to be tenacious instead of just giving up when the going got tough, and so I told him that if he quit his job then he would have to move out of our house because I was sick of him and his lame excuses. Even before this, he had already been doing a decent job but not good enough, and it was just not okay because he was 22 at the time. I think he was old enough to realize that if he wanted better opportunities then he would have to work harder for it, and I would not always be there to bail him out and arrange work for him. And it wasn't even as though he was not getting paid enough to do the kind of work that he was expected to do. He just didn't want to do it because he was lazy and didn't enjoy the hard work but wanted the money. Unfortunately, that's not the way the world works, and you have to work for what you want, but my son was having a really difficult time coming to terms with that. So I told him that he could either continue working where he was or he could move out and do whatever he wanted to, but as long as he was living under my roof, he would have to live by my rules and he couldn't just quit because he had to actually work. And that day, we got into a really nasty fight because he was not ready to acknowledge the facts and insisted that I was being unreasonable and way too hard on him, but I thought that this kind of tough love was quite necessary because otherwise, he could end up in some bad situations in the future. So when he told me that he wanted to quit and I gave him that ultimatum, things escalated pretty quickly after that, and before we knew it, we were in a full-blown shouting match. He accused me of never thinking about him and being selfish, and I said that he was being ungrateful and he needed to sort out his thoughts. While we were fighting, my wife tried to de-escalate the situation for a bit, but then my son started getting very agitated and started cussing at me, which didn't sit right with my wife. So even she got mad and told him that he had no right to speak to me that way after everything that I had done for him, and that I was actually right and he needed to learn how to stick it out instead of just quitting anytime things got tough. And that's when my son turned to my wife and said something unforgivable. He told her that as somebody who had been living off of my salary her entire life and had never worked a day in her life had no right to tell him that he should continue working, and told my wife to shut up and let us speak because she had no idea what she was even talking about. It was the single most horrible thing that my son has ever said, and even in that moment, the enormity of it was not lost on either of us because what he said was disgusting and disrespectful on every conceivable level, and I immediately told him to apologize to his mother, but he refused to take it back and said that he had no regrets about saying what he did because he knew that he was right. My wife was really hurt and rushed to the bedroom so her son wouldn't be able to see her cry, and I followed her. After comforting her for a few minutes, I went back out to talk to my son and realized that he was sitting on the couch really casually as if nothing had even happened, and texting on his phone. There was no trace of remorse or regret on his face, and I think that's what set me off because I then grabbed him by the arm and lifted him off the couch before telling him that I had had enough of him and he had crossed a line today that he could never take back, so now he had to leave and I would not allow him to come back until he got his head back on straight and apologized to his mother for what he said to her. He didn't even say anything and just went back to his room. A few minutes later, he came back down and he was carrying 2 bags that looked like they had been packed with everything that he owned. Then he walked out of the house without a word or even a glance back, and that was the last time that we saw him in person. 6 years passed after that and we never really heard from him after that. He did come back a couple of days after he had moved out initially, but that was only to collect the few things that he had left behind, and after that, there was no contact between us. I heard from my friend that he had stopped showing up for work a week after our fight and had even emailed them his resignation. I thanked my friend for helping me out when I needed him, but what my son did was no longer in my control, and my wife and I had completely given up any hopes that we had from him. About 3 years after he left, we received news from a couple of our relatives that he was getting married, but we were not invited, and neither did we expect him to invite us after 3 years of not speaking to each other. We hoped that his marriage would be successful, but we did not speak to him or reach out to him. And neither did we reach out to each other when, after about a year, we learned that he was going to be a father. We wanted him to be happy, but if he was happy staying away from us, then we were not going to disrupt that. So we kept our distance for 6 long years and never spoke to him after that. My wife wanted to reach out to him on several occasions, but I told her that I would not be a part of it and that if she wanted to do so then she could go ahead on her own. Since I did not want to speak to my son, she did not do so either, and that was that. And then, about a week ago, my wife passed away and I have been miserable since then. It was really unexpected and I still have no idea how to cope with this because I still feel like she will walk through the door at any given moment and try to make me laugh or say something incredibly witty. But I know that that's impossible now and I am having a really difficult time dealing with this. She is the only woman I have ever loved and been with and I don't know how to live without her because I never thought that day would ever come and I definitely didn't think that day would come so soon. It's been a massive task, organizing her funeral and everything, but I've been functioning somehow because I want it to be well organized since that's the way that she would have wanted it to be. And even though it has been a really difficult time for me, I was able to organize a decent funeral somehow, just to get it over with so that I can finally deal with my emotions. Yesterday, everything was going well and then my son showed up with his family. His wife and his son were quiet but looked sad and confused, but my son did not waste any time and as soon as he showed up, he walked right over to me and pulled me into a hug, and started crying. I had a bit of a breakdown as well and we ended up hugging and crying for almost 5 minutes because everything was just rushing out of me and I couldn't hold the tears in any longer. He said that he was sorry about everything and I told him that I forgave him because his mother's funeral was no place to still be holding grudges against him and everything that had happened in the past felt like it didn't even matter anymore because my wife was gone and that's the only thing that I could think about. I could really do with the moral support that only my son would be able to offer me, more than any friends or family. So he apologized with tears in his eyes and I felt like it was genuine, but I was obviously being an emotional fool. He even introduced me to my daughter-in-law and my grandson and they were quite nice to me as well. But a few hours later after the eulogies and everything we did, my son asked me if he could speak to me in private and I agreed because I thought that he was going to talk to me about his mom or something less outrageous. Once we were sat in my office together, he told me that there was no easy way to bring this up at such a time but he felt like he had to ask me because he was really in need of some extra cash at the moment and told me that he had pulled me aside to talk to me about his inheritance. I am not even kidding when I say this, but I was literally in shock when he said those words because his mother had barely been buried and he was already talking about what he stood to gain from her demise. He went on talking and said that he was having a difficult time with money because he had recently quit another job that he had been working for the past few months but his savings were about to dwindle out and he was actually planning on starting his own business but he did not have enough money to do so and was hoping that maybe if his mother had left him anything then he would use that to fund his own business. I just patiently heard him out while he shared with me how he was living off of his wife's salary for the past few months and it was getting really difficult for him to do so because it was very emasculating and he needed my help at this point. After he was done talking, I told him to get out of my house immediately and I told him never to come back because he was literally the human version of a garbage can and I did not want him loitering anywhere near my wife and the places she held close to her heart, including our home. He looked surprised when I told him that and tried to tell me that he was just asking about the inheritance and that was no pressure on me yet to arrange something immediately, but I told him that I did not appreciate what he was trying to do and said that he needed to leave or else I would call the cops and have him escorted out. But he fought with me and told me that this was his mother's funeral and he had every right to be here and I could not stop him from attending and I started screaming at him because I was already heartbroken from the passing of my wife and now when I finally thought that my son was being a decent human being I realized that he was actually incapable of being a good person and would always remain a total failure. So we got into a very loud fight once again and called each other every derogatory name in the book before I finally kicked him out and requested his wife to leave with his son because I was losing my mind and I did not want to ruin my wife's funeral with this. And in a fit of anger, I decided to call our lawyer up and ask him if my wife had left anything to her son and he told me that she had just left him some money and a few items of jewelry which was all worth around maybe $25,000 in total. I told him that I wanted to contest the will because I wanted to make sure that he did not receive anything since he was obviously not deserving of it. But now I have calmed down considerably and after my little outburst yesterday, I did speak to a couple of people from my family and everybody told me that I overreacted a little and I should have dealt with everything with a cooler head instead of reacting like that. They told me that I have every right to be mad at my son because what he did was simply disgusting, but instead of kicking him out like that and then making that very public and loud call to my lawyer and demanding that we contest the will of my wife just because I wanted to teach my son a lesson was all a bit too much and I should really reconsider what I want to do about all of this. And I have been thinking about it and I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not. So Ida for kicking my son out of my wife's funeral when he brought up his inheritance and trying to contest her will because of it? Update 1. So I spoke to my lawyer and told him that I did not want to contest the will and he told me that he had not started the proceedings anyway because he knew that I was mad about something and once I cooled off, I will change my mind, so that was one good thing. My lawyer and I, for context, have been friends for a very long time and he had known my wife quite well as well. And my son had actually come to the funeral shortly after he had left so they did not run into each other but he heard about me out first and the fight that I had with him from other people. He advised me to think about everything with a cool head and then come to a conclusion about what I wanted to do because getting upset and making rash decisions would not help in the long run but both of us knew that what my son said the other day was just unacceptable behavior and I had to set him straight somehow. So after a lot of deliberation, we decided that I was not going to contest my wife's will just to deprive him of the money and the jewelry that she had left for him but I was definitely going to make sure that I changed my will and didn't leave him a single thing. Because my wife might have had a soft corner for him, in spite of everything that he did but for me, that soft spot does not exist anymore, Especially after the incident that took place a couple of days ago. I don't think I can ever forgive that, and I don't think I want to. So my lawyer and I have decided that we are going to change the contents of the will, and I have not done it so far because, against all hopes, I had foolishly believed that by the end of my life, I probably would have been able to reconcile with my son, but now that seems increasingly impossible, and I don't think I want to reconcile with a person like that because I can't even recognize him as my son anymore. He is a stranger to me, and a stranger does not deserve to be included in my will. And I have a lot of other people who I would rather leave all my money and my business than my son, because he clearly does not value me as his father, and neither did he ever value his mother when she was still alive. I guess the only good part of any of this is that my wife never had to find out what a horrible person our son had turned into. She passed away still believing that he would be able to become a better person someday. That's my only consolation. Update 2. Today, my lawyer finally contacted my son to tell him that while he would be receiving whatever his mother had left them as soon as the probate was over, he would not be receiving anything from me because, according to the contents of my will, everything was going to go to other people. Basically, everybody apart from him who had been a part of my life would be getting something or the other, and because of his little stunt at my wife's funeral, he would not be receiving anything. The only reason we even felt it was necessary to notify him was because I thought that maybe at least this knowledge would lead him to apologize to us and acknowledge that what he did was messed up, but nothing of the sort happened. Instead, he told my lawyer to tell me that he did not care whether he received anything from me or not, because he would rather be poor and miserable than receive anything from me and constantly be reminded of the fact that I had done him a huge favor, because that's exactly what my intentions would be, even in death. So I guess that's it now. Update 3. Hey, almost 9 months have passed since my wife passed away, and I am doing better now. I have been in therapy and I am trying to deal with my emotions, but it's been hard. I can't deny that. But I know that life goes on and I also have to go on, so I've been trying my best to do right by my wife and doing everything that I knew she would want me to do, because that's what is most important to me right now. I have not spoken to my son after that last phone call that my lawyer made, and neither has he reached out to me, even to check up on me, but that's kind of expected from him. I heard from a couple of people that he was moving out of state with the money that he got from his mother and was going to start up a business closer to his wife's home, so I guess that's good for him. I hope he does well in life, and I hope that I live long enough to see him succeed, but I don't wish to speak to him anymore after this. If he ever comes back to his senses and apologizes, with no ulterior motives, then maybe I might think about repairing our relationship, but it seems unlikely as of now. Until then, it's just going to be me and the memory of my wife that keeps me going. I miss her and I think about her every day, but I just know that she is in a better place now, and I hope that she's out there somewhere looking out for me in her own way.